President Harris's words make me want to go back to law school and start all over again. Thank you, President Harris, for those inspiring words and calling us to love and to do good, always. Our next speaker is this year's class president, Mr. Pete Raju. Mr. Raju graduated with his bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Oklahoma in just 2 years. And he entered OU Law as part of our early entry program at the tender age of 19. During his time at OU Law, Mr. Raju was part of several competition teams, and he was also a student ambassador, 1L class president, and SBA chief of staff. He has accepted an offer at the Oklahoma Indigent Defense System's General Appeals Division. Please join me in welcoming your classmate, Mr. Pete Raju.
I think President Harris plagiarized my speech. But good evening. I was told there would be teleprompters. There are no teleprompters, so I've got my notes. I'm so thankful that I get to stand before you all and speak. The whole reason I ran to be class president was so I could give this speech. My sister has been the favorite child for far too long, and it is my turn to shine. She's around here somewhere. But the reason I even get to do this is because of God and the tireless efforts of Dean Guzman, Lisa Ross, Carol Booth, Becky Lucas, and of course, my fellow classmate, Caitlin Niles. Caitlin is actually the reason that we get to have this graduation at all. She worked hard on behalf of our class and personally met with and spoke with several of these administrators that you see. So a big thank you to her from not only myself, but on behalf of both of our classes here and of course, all of our friends and family. And speaking of the class of 2020, I wanted to say thank you all for coming. It breaks my heart that you all didn't get to have one last law prom and one last graduation party, but I am happy that I get to see you all, especially Alex Gebert. Alex was last year's class president. And I wish that you could have gotten time to speak. Tell us some sage counsel and advice from what it's like to be out in the real world. I asked the administration and they said no. They also told me I couldn't say any jokes about professors, which is terrible because I had written this book of 101 jokes about OU Law professors. And they told me I couldn't say any of them. It's blank, don't worry. So I will settle for making fun of my friends here. All law students can be categorized on a scale. On one end, you have imposter syndrome. And on the other end, you have superiority complex. Some students have a little bit of imposter syndrome and a lot of superiority complex. Some have a little bit of superiority with a lot of imposter. The truly cursed ones have 100% of both. Imposter syndrome is so prevalent in law schools across America that administrations bring in guest speakers and have special meetings to tell us to not let that feeling get the best of us. And I still remember what then Dean, now President Harris, told us our 1L year. He said, "No one here is trying to weed you out. The weed out process occurs even before you are selected." And I echo that sentiment. For those of you hearing me today who struggle with imposter syndrome, which is about 99% of us, let me tell you, you are not an imposter. You are not a fraud. I'm speaking to myself just as I'm speaking to y'all. We made it through the craziest law school experience, and we're now graduating with our Juris Doctor. And I know that for many of us, the pandemic did affect our mental health, and it did for mine as well. I didn't even know what imposter syndrome was before I came to law school. But through all the hardships, we made it, not as imposters, but as lawyers. A lot of graduate programs will compare their program with other graduate programs. For example, there have been times where we as a law school have looked at what the med school is doing, or just OU HSC in general. So let's compare law students and med students. I have never met a med student or a doctor who didn't think they were God's gift to earth. But for some reason, we in the legal field think we're all imposters and morons. Why? I can tell you with certainty that every one of you seated in front of me deserves to be here. You may think that you don't. You may think that you didn't work hard. And if you truly didn't work hard and you're still here, that shows just how intelligent you actually are. Law school is not easy, especially not Zoom School of Law. There are members of my class seated here who were parents while going through law school, and not just law school, online law school. Now, I found it hard to pay attention in my empty apartment. I can only imagine how difficult it was with a 4-year-old screaming in your ear and your mic is unmuted and your camera's on, which happened to several of my classmates several times. But in the words of the great poet Aubrey Drake Graham, we made it. You're here. You're not an imposter. You didn't just slip through the cracks and happen to end up here. Every single one of you is capable of greatness, and I genuinely believe that. And I wish that our dear classmate Nick Watts were here with us. Now, I didn't know Nick too well. I only had 2 classes with him. But with what few interactions I did have with him, I can say this. Nick truly was one of the best of us. And so to the Watts family, I, and on behalf of all of the classes seated here, offer our sincerest condolences. Now, greatness doesn't mean that we're all going to work for Crow and McAfee. If you hear nothing else tonight, I ask that you hear this. Greatness is not measured by who you work for or how much money you make. It's measured by what you do. Do you ever help others, or are you always expecting others to help you? Do you only look out for your own interests, or do you take an interest in other people? Anyone can talk, but do you practice what you preach? Do you treat others the way you would want to be treated without the expectation that they will treat you the same way? Are you humble? These are some of the hallmarks of great people. And like President Harris said, we can all change the world. And I don't necessarily mean the entire world, all 7, 8 billion people, although I guess you could. But the place where you work, the people you live with, the people you interact with, that's your world. And you can influence and change that for better or for worse. And I truly hope it's for the better, but it's kind of hard to do that when you see yourself as an imposter or a fraud. Be kind to yourself. You're not an imposter, you're a lawyer, and you deserve to be here. Class of 2021, we're done. I'll see you all in 10 years for the reunion.